The car was already moving before Maya finished deciding whether to scream. Black sedan, black windows, two men in front who hadn't said a word since the curb. The locks had thunked down the second the door closed. Not a threat, just a fact, the sound of a decision someone else had already made about her life. Outside, Seoul slid past in ribbons of neon and rain, a city she'd been in for exactly 40 minutes. She didn't scream. She watched. She counted the turns, clocked the driver's eyes in the mirror, and noticed that the man beside her wore a watch that cost more than the men who usually did this kind of work could afford. Organized. Funded. Not street. It was, she would realize later, the most useful thought she had that night. They brought her into a building with no name and no sign, up a private elevator that needed a key, into a room with one steel table and two chairs. They sat her down. They slid a single sheet of paper across the steel. She read it the way she read everything, top to bottom, looking for the lie. My wife came to me as a debt payment, the man who owned that building would say later. By the time she was done, she owned everything I had. And I let her. But that was later. Right now, there was only the paper, and the quiet man across from her, and a sentence near the bottom that made her go still. "You'll forgive me," Maya said, "if I read this twice." "Take your time," the quiet man said. His name was Min-jun. He folded his hands. "Most people in your position are crying by now." Most people in my position didn't spend 11 years auditing men who lie for a living. She turned the page over. Nothing on the back. She turned it again. "This says I belong to a Han Du-yun, as settlement of a debt." "My debt?" "Your husband's." And there it was, the small, surgical detail that told her the whole story before anyone explained a thing. Property. That's cute. The last man who thought he owned me is, I'm guessing, the reason I'm in this chair. So you'll understand the word doesn't land for me the way you rehearsed it. Min-jun opened his mouth. A door she hadn't heard open let in a voice instead. "Leave us." She turned, and the thing she felt, looking at Han Du-yun for the first time, was not the thing a sensible woman feels when a dangerous man walks into a locked room. She felt interested. He was younger than she expected, and stiller than anyone she'd ever met, a stillness that filled the room instead of emptying it. He looked at her the way she looked at a ledger, like she was the only honest thing in the building, and he hadn't decided yet what she was for. "You read the contract," he said. "I read everything." "And?" "And I have a question your paperwork doesn't answer." She leaned back in the steel chair like it was hers. "What does a man like you want with a woman who counts other people's money?" For just a moment, gone almost before it landed, something moved behind his eyes. "Everything," he said, and left. 72 hours earlier. The lipstick was the wrong color, and that was how Maya knew. Cherry bomb. Not her shade. She only ever wore nude. 11 years of being the calmest, least decorated person in every room had a uniform, and red was not in it. So when Marcus walked into their kitchen with that smear on his collar, she didn't feel the floor drop. She felt something colder. She felt the click of a number that doesn't reconcile. "Whose is that?" she said. He didn't hide it. That was the part that turned her stomach, not the cheating, the ease of it. He crossed to the cabinet and took down the one bottle she'd asked him never to touch. Her father's bourbon, the last thing on earth that was only hers, and he poured 2 fingers of it like it was nothing. "Does it matter?" he said. "It matters to me." "It shouldn't." He drank her father. Turned around, relaxed, almost bored. "It's an open marriage, babe. Get used to it." The room went far away. Since when? Since I said so. He smiled the smile she'd married. If I can cheat, so can you. Consider it a gift, Maya. Most husbands wouldn't be this generous. She did not throw the glass. She'd learned a long time ago that the people who win are the ones who go cold when everyone expects them to go hot. So she went cold, and she went to the place she was best. The discrepancies that got me fired, she said slowly. The numbers at my firm that didn't reconcile. The ones that ended 11 years of my career in a single afternoon. She watched his face. That was you. The smile flickered. You moved money through my access. You buried something filthy inside my ledgers, and when it started to smell, you cut me loose so it would land on me. Her voice didn't rise. It got quieter, which was worse. What did you get into, Marcus? What did you do that needed my good name to hide it? For 1 second, the confident man looked afraid. Then he finished her father's bourbon, set the empty glass on the counter, and said nothing at all. He didn't have to. Because 3 days later, 2 men in a black car would explain it for him. On the 40th floor of a building with no name, Han Do-yoon closed a folder with her photograph clipped to the front. He had read every page twice. Salary, maiden name, the 11-year career a coward had set on fire to save himself. He knew her husband, too, a soft, frightened man named Marcus, who had borrowed from the wrong people, then borrowed more to cover it, and who, cornered, had offered something instead of money. My wife, Marcus had said in a parking garage, sweating. She's worth more than the debt. She knows numbers. Take her. What Marcus didn't know, what he was far too small to imagine, was that Han Do-yoon had been watching him for half a year. Not for the money. The money was a rounding error. He'd been watching because Marcus's name kept surfacing beside another name. A name Do-yoon had spent 6 years hunting through every shell company and silent account on 2 continents. A man he had once called Hyung, brother. And the soft, sweating fool in the garage had just handed Do-yoon the one thing in the world that could prove who really owned everything. Because Maya Bennett didn't just count money. She found the money men buried so deep they thought it was gone. The hidden trails of ownership that proved, in the end, whose empire it actually was. Marcus thought he was paying off one debt. He had no idea he'd just armed the only man alive who could destroy his partner. The wife, Do-yoon said, sliding the folder to Min-jun. Bring her before the husband does something stupider. And handle her how? Do-yoon looked at the city. Carefully. I suspect she's the only honest thing in this entire matter. I'd rather not break it before I know what it's for. Maya. Danny's voice came down the line from a kitchen in Atlanta where it was still afternoon and the world still made sense. I need you to say I am coming home. In that order. Slowly. It's complicated. It is not complicated. It is a mafia in Seoul, and my baby sister is the new... The whisper turned horrified. Are you the wife? Did you become somebody's wife? Maya stood at the window of a room that wasn't hers, holding a glass of water, looking at a skyline that didn't care whether she lived. Danny, she said, I have to go. Maya. Maya! What are you doing? She hung up, and could not, for the life of her, have answered the question. They gave her a desk on the 39th floor, and a room full of men who looked at her like a mistake the boss would correct shortly. She let them. She'd been underestimated by better. For 3 days, they handed her sanitized files designed to keep her busy and blind, and for 3 days, she read what was under them, the way the totals leaned, the accounts that were a little too quiet. On the 4th day, in a meeting she wasn't supposed to speak in, she set her finger on a line in a ledger and said, This is wrong. The room went silent, the way the steel table room had gone silent. That account moved $11 million through a logistics shell that doesn't own a single truck, she said, not looking up. Someone inside your house has been bleeding you for 2 years, and they're good. They're routing it through the one company nobody audits because it's named after your founder. You've been looking for a thief and tipping your cap to him every time you say his company's name. A man started to object. Do-yoon, in the doorway, he was always somehow in the doorway, lifted one finger, and the man went quiet. Do-yoon looked at her for a long moment. "Find the rest of it," he said. It wasn't a request, and it wasn't about money. She didn't know that yet. She thought he'd handed her a task. He'd handed her a thread that ran straight into the wound at the center of his life, and a danger that had just noticed her name. Because 1,000 miles away, in a house he'd been exiled from, the thief heard that someone in his brother's tower had said the word ownership out loud. And he started, very quietly, to plan. She felt it before she understood it. A car that idled too long outside the tower. A man on the 39th floor she didn't recognize, who didn't come back the next day. Minjun, normally unreadable, checking the hall before he let her into a room. "Something's wrong," she told Do-yoon one night, the only 2 people left on the floor. "Your people are scared. I can read a room better than I can read a ledger, and I read ledgers in my sleep. Who am I actually working for?" He didn't answer the question. He answered a different one, the one underneath it. "You're safe in this building," he said. "That's not what I asked." "I know." He crossed to the window, and for a moment the stillness cracked. Just a hairline. "Gwenchana," he said, almost to himself. "It's all right." Then, in English, as if he didn't trust himself in his own language, "I won't let anything happen to you. That part you can believe." She should have pushed. Instead, she found herself standing closer to him than the conversation required, close enough to see that the dangerous man was tired in a way money couldn't fix. "You keep doing that," she said softly. "Doing what?" "Standing in doorways, holding them open, like you're always deciding whether to let someone in or keep them out." He turned. They were very close now. Outside, the rain had started again. Inside, neither of them moved. "And which is this?" he said. She didn't know. That was the terrifying part. That for the first time since a kitchen and a bottle of her father's bourbon, Maya Bennett genuinely did not know what she wanted to happen next. His hand lifted, slow, like approaching something that might run. The back of his fingers stopped a breath from her cheek. And the phone on the desk lit up the dark, buzzing hard against the steel, and they both stepped back like the floor had moved. Minjun's name on the screen. At 2 a.m., Minjun only called for one reason. Do-yoon answered, listened, and went very, very still. "What is it?" Maya said. He looked at her, and in his face was the thing she'd been trying to name for a week, finally surfacing. It wasn't danger. It was fear. For her. "Someone just tried to take you," he said quietly. "Out of the one building in Seoul where I thought you couldn't be reached." He set the phone down. "Which means it isn't a stranger. It's family." They didn't take her. Minjun's men reached the loading dock in time, and the van peeled into the dark with nothing but a torn coat sleeve left behind. But the message had been sent, and Do-yoon read it the way Maya read ledgers, for the lie underneath. "They didn't come to kill you," he said, pacing the 39th floor while she sat very still and pretended her hands weren't shaking. They came to take you, alive, which means they want what's in your head. And what's in my head? He stopped. For a long moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he crossed to the desk, unlocked a drawer she'd never seen him open, and set a photograph in front of her. Two young men, arms around each other, laughing on a dock somewhere bright. She recognized the younger one. The stillness was already in his eyes, even then. "My brother," Do-yoon said. "Tae-jin. 6 years ago, he sold me to the people who killed our father, and walked away with half of everything while I bled in a stairwell." He said it flatly, the way you report a number you've recited until it stopped cutting. "I let the world believe he was dead, easier than admitting he was alive and that I couldn't bring myself to finish it." Maya looked at the laughing boys, then at the man in front of her. "He's the thief," she said softly. "The 11 million. The shell named after your founder. That's him." "That's him. And the ownership trail I'm pulling proves which of us the Empire actually belongs to." He met her eyes. "Whoever holds that proof holds everything. He needs you to bury it. I need you to find it. And now he knows you exist." She should have been afraid. She was, a clean, rational fear. But under it was something she had no business feeling, looking at a dangerous man holding a photograph of the brother who'd broken him. She understood him. She knew exactly what it was to be sold by the person who was supposed to love you most. "My husband traded me for a debt," she said. "Your brother traded you for an empire. Same knife. They just charged different prices." Something in his face came apart, very quietly. "Go and sleep," he said, rough. "Please." She went. Neither of them slept. The nights changed after that. She still worked the trail by day, pulling Tae-jin's hidden money into the light one shell at a time. But the nights became something else. Two armored people circling the thing they were both too scarred to name. He'd appear in the doorway of the file room at midnight with 2 cups of tea and say nothing for an hour. She'd catch him watching her work and watch him pretend he hadn't been. Once, reaching for the same file, their hands closed over each other's and neither pulled back for 3 full seconds. 3 seconds that lasted longer than her entire marriage. Once, he taught her to say her own name in Korean and laughed, actually laughed, a sound that startled them both, when she got the tone wrong and accidentally called herself a vegetable. Once, she fell asleep at the desk and woke with his coat over her shoulders and him gone, and she sat in the dark holding the collar to her face for a long time before she made herself stop. She called Danny at 4 a.m. Seoul time. "You like him," Danny said, not a question. "He's a criminal." "That is not a no, Maya." "He's a criminal who hasn't lied to me once," Maya said, and only realized as she said it that it was the most romantic sentence she'd spoken in years, and that it would turn out not to be entirely true. The bottle came out on a Thursday. She didn't plan it. He'd found her at the window with her father's bourbon, the one bottle she'd carried 6,000 miles and never opened, turning it in her hands. "You don't drink it," he observed. "My father left it to me. The one man who never once made me feel like a thing to be traded." She didn't look at him. "I keep thinking I'll open it when I have something worth toasting. 11 years and I never did." Do-yoon was quiet a moment. Then he took 2 glasses from the cabinet and set them down. "I don't drink," he said. "Ever. In my work, the man who drinks is the man who talks." He poured 2 careful fingers into each glass anyway. "But I'll have one with you. For your father. For the one honest man." She stared at him. "That's the most dangerous thing you could do," she said. "Lower your guard. With me. In a room with no witnesses." "Yes," he said simply, and lifted his glass. They drank. The bourbon was warm and old and tasted like a thing her father would have approved of. And when she set her glass down, she found him close, closer than the room required, close the way the doorway nights had been building toward for weeks. And this time there was no phone, no van, no Minjun. This time he kissed her, or she kissed him. Afterward, neither of them could have testified which, and both privately suspected it had been mutual and simultaneous and inevitable. The breaking of a dam that had been straining since a steel table and a single word. Everything. It lasted exactly as long as it took both of them to remember they were people who did not survive by wanting things. They broke apart at the same moment, stepped back at the same moment, stood there breathing in the dark, terrified in the same exact shape. "That can't happen again," she said. "No," he agreed. Both of them were lying, and both of them knew it, and that was the most honest conversation they'd had yet. She found the last piece 2 days later, and it stopped her cold. It wasn't about Tae-jin. It was about Marcus. The money her husband had buried in her ledgers, the filth that ended her career, hadn't been hers to launder by accident. Marcus hadn't stumbled into debt with a sole organization. He'd been working for one, feeding it, the American end of a pipeline that ran straight to Tae-jin. Her husband and Do-yoon's brother were the same network. Her ruin and his betrayal were one rope. And the second thing she found was worse, because it was about Do-yoon. He'd known. Not all of it, but enough. He'd known, before he ever brought her to Seoul, that Marcus was feeding Tae-jin. He'd known her husband had a hand in the thing that had broken her, and he'd sat across a steel table and a dozen midnights and a bottle of her father's bourbon and said nothing. She found him in the doorway. Of course she did. "You knew." Her voice was very quiet, which by now he understood was the dangerous one. "You knew Marcus was tied to your brother before you ever sent that car. You let me work beside you for weeks thinking I was just good at my job, and the whole time you knew the men who ended my life and the man who ended yours were the same men." Maya. Was that the plan? Now it rose. Bring in the wreck of a woman, let her think she's valued, let her fall for the one man who looked at her like she mattered, and use her grief as fuel to burn your brother down? Is that what the bourbon was? Is that what I am? No. He said it hard and stepped through the doorway toward her, the first time she'd ever seen him cross a threshold without weighing it. "I didn't tell you because the moment you knew Marcus was connected to Tae-jin, you'd have gone after it. You'd have gone loud. And Tae-jin would have killed you before I could put a single man between you and him." His voice dropped. "I have built my whole life out of telling people only what keeps them useful. With you, I told you nothing because I was trying, badly, in the only language I have, to keep you alive. That's the truth. It's an ugly one, but it's not the one you're accusing me of." She wanted to believe it. That was the trap. She wanted to, and wanting was exactly what had cost her everything last time. "I trusted a man who hid things from me to protect himself," she said. "I'm not doing it twice. I'd rather be alone and certain than safe and a fool." She walked out. He let her, held the door even now, and the holding of it was the loudest thing in the room. That night, he came to her with a folder and a set of car keys. "The debt's cleared," he said. "All of it. I closed it tonight." She stared at him. You can't have. We haven't finished. I closed it. You're free. He set the keys on the table between them. There's a car downstairs and a flight at 6. Atlanta. Your sister. His jaw worked. You can be home before she's had her coffee. Why, Maya said, would you do that? And Han Du-yoon, who survived by never showing a card, laid them all face up. Because your husband put you in a cage and called it a gift. Because my brother puts everyone in a cage and calls it family. He opened the door, the one to the hallway, to the elevator, to the car, to Atlanta. He opened it wide. I will not be a third man who keeps you somewhere you didn't choose. So I'm doing the one thing neither of them ever did. I'm opening the door and telling you the truth at the same time. What truth? That I need you to find the last of it. That my brother will be exposed at the gala on Friday, whether you're in the room or not. He held the door. And that I would rather lose the war with you safe in Atlanta than win it with you in a cage. Go home, Maya. Please. This time, someone is letting you choose. The hallway was right there. The car was downstairs. Danny was 6,000 miles away with the kettle on. Maya looked at the open door for a long, long time. Then she picked up the keys, crossed the room, and set them down on the far side of the table, out of her own reach. Friday, she said. What time's the gala? She walked into the gala on Han Do-yoon's arm, in a gown the color of a closing argument, and the room turned the way rooms do for a woman who has stopped asking permission. Marcus was there, smaller than she remembered. He'd flown in thinking he was negotiating his way out, not knowing his wife had spent 3 weeks building the thing that would bury him. He found her by the windows and made the last mistake of his marriage. He sneered. So this is what you traded up to, he said, low, ugly. You think he won't get bored? You're still just Marcus. She didn't raise her voice. She'd learned that from a man who stood in doorways. She leaned in, close, the way you lean in to tell someone a secret, and she gave him back the words he'd handed her over a bottle of her dead father's bourbon. It's an open marriage, babe. Get used to it. If I can cheat, so can you. Consider it a gift. The blood left his face, because behind her, screens around the ballroom were waking up. The ownership trail, the 11 million, the pipeline, every buried account she'd dragged into the light, displayed for every dangerous man in that room to read. Tae-jin's empire, proven down to the last shell to belong to the brother he'd left in a stairwell. And Marcus's name threaded through all of it, the American errand boy, exposed in front of the only people he'd been counting on to protect him. Tae-jin had come to be crowned. He was, instead, undone, in a single silent minute, by a woman he'd sent a van to abduct and never bothered to fear. Marcus reached for her arm. Min-jun was there before he closed the distance, and then Marcus wasn't reaching for anything anymore. She hadn't raised a hand. She'd raised the truth. Her mind had ended both of them, and the loudest thing in that ballroom was the sound of powerful men quietly deciding whose side to be on now. It ended where it began. A door. The war was won. The debt was ash. She was, by every law in 2 countries, free. No contract, no collateral, no cage. Do-yoon walked her to the same private elevator they'd brought her up in on the first night, and he pressed the button, and he held the door. You can go, he said. Nothing holds you here now. Not a debt, not a threat, not a single thing I'm allowed to call a reason. The stillness was back, but underneath it she could see, now, everything it had ever been protecting. I let you go once, and you stayed. I won't pretend to understand it. But the door's open. It's always going to be open. That's the only promise I know how to keep. Maya stood in the threshold, the exact place she'd spent a whole story watching him stand, deciding who to let in and who to keep out. She did not step through it. She turned around, back to him. A price tag, she said, is only power if you let the buyer set it. Nobody sets mine again. And she finally understood what the doorways had been. Not walls. Choices. He'd been offering her one the whole time, in the only language a man like him had. Here's the deal, she said. I'm not collateral, and I'm not a gift a coward gets to sign away. She closed the distance he'd never once closed without permission. I'm staying because I read the whole contract, and for the first time in my life, the terms are mine. I choose this. I choose you. Try to cage me, and I'll bankrupt you for real. And you've seen my work. For the first time since a doc and a photograph and a brother who laughed, Han Do-yun said the most dangerous thing he had ever said out loud. "사랑해," he said. I love you. And then, because he'd promised her the truth in the only language she fully trusted, I love you. That's the truth. It's the most expensive thing I own. She took the bottle from her bag, her father's bourbon, and poured 2 careful fingers into the cap, because there were no glasses in an elevator, and neither of them cared. To the one honest man, she said. To the woman who bankrupted me, he answered, and let me keep the only thing I wanted. They drank. The door stayed open behind them because neither of them needed it closed anymore. My wife came to me as a debt payment. By the time she was done, she owned everything I had. And I have never, in my life, made a better trade. If you made it to the end of their story, that's the part that matters to me. So do me a favor. Tell me in the comments whose side you ended on. And the moment Maya turned that line back on Marcus, drop a "so I know it landed." If this one kept you watching, hit like and subscribe. The next story's already loading, and someone's about to make a far more dangerous mistake than Marcus did.